Hey guys, so I put together a part of a sample outline for you as a guide because I've had a couple of people email me and ask how they're supposed to structure an outline, which is a very fair question. And so, first of all, there's a couple of reasons we're doing an outline. Part of it is just because of timing. Part of it is because it's the end of the semester or end of the summer session, and typically my last paper is an outline because I find that to be better indication of your writing than actually a full written paper when it comes to argumentation. And since things have been a little bit quickened in the past couple weeks, that's really what I'm most interested in is how your argumentation is panning out and how you're able to structure those arguments, how you're able to counter certain arguments, how you're able to treat pieces of evidence. So, this is mine, and it's going to be a little bit shorter than yours is because I only included the first two paragraphs. After that, I included the rest of my topic sentences and also what kinds of evidence I'm going to include. Excuse me, but I didn't do the whole thing because that's your job to write the whole thing. But this should give you an idea of what an outline could look like. And I need to say right off the bat that there is not one right way to make an outline. We have to first and foremost understand that this is a rhetorical document, and our first goal, much like any way that we communicate, is to be understood. And so that means structuring in a way that's going to be helpful for me to read, helpful for other people to read. One of the other reasons that we're doing an outline is because honestly, a lot of the writing that we do in the workplace is in outline form, extended outline form. If you're in any kind of position where you're going to be meeting with clients or meeting with a team, um, you are going to have to construct outlines that have lots of information in them. And so it's actually a really big skill to be able to edit yourself and to get at the thrust of what you're talking about and to get rid of all of that cluttery stuff and think about what is my actual argument, what's going to be helpful for somebody to read. And so I'm a big fan of the outline. And so it is easier to do because you're not doing all of the writing. It does take less time. However, it still requires the same kind of energy to create an argument. So please don't write it off as, oh, here's my first, second, third, fourth paragraph. I'm done. Because keep in mind, this is a 5 to 7 page paper, which means you're going to need probably at least 7 paragraphs, at the least. And that's including an intro and in conclusion. So I think I end up having about 9, but I also have to preface that I put a lot more information in here than is actually needed. I just wanted to show you what you're able to construct. So I have more sources than you need. That's also just me as a researcher. I can't help myself. But research is a great place for you to it's a great thing to add in if you're worried that it's not long enough. So you have access to this document. You have access to all the comments I made on the side that are editorializing the choices I made. I'm just going to run through it really quickly. There's not a whole lot else I'm going to talk about in here. First and foremost, make sure that it's an MLA. You can look up, I think OWL Purdue is the best source for MLA. It's owlpurdue.com, and there's all of these different style guides. And I don't expect people to memorize these. I don't have it memorized. I write for scholarly journals, and I go on OWL Purdue to remind myself how to cite a certain thing. So don't waste space in your brain learning MLA because also it changes every year. Give yourself a little fun topic, a fun title. I bolded and italicized things in here. That was just to make it more understandable. You can absolutely bold and italicize things if you'd like. That's completely up to you. One structural thing I do ask is that you single space your outline. It's much easier to read, just as a paper is easier to read in double space because you're reading in a different way. Here we're just sort of grabbing at information, so it's better to have it all on one page. Because if I double space this, paragraphs would be on multiple pages, and that means that I'm going to have to go back to the beginning of that paragraph on a different page to understand. So I broke mine up this way. First, I started with the basic summary. So you do not need an introduction. What you do need to do is have sort of one point where you explain everything that happened. So mine was a video that was from Instagram, and it was a video from a black man's perspective of a woman who doubted that he lived in his neighborhood. And it's mind-boggling because he ends up unlocking his door and she's still standing there and like doesn't believe him even though his kids are coming out, and then she doubles down and ends up saying, yeah, well, you're a drug dealer. It's a bizarre video, so maybe that's a familiar one for you guys. But some of you guys have chosen articles. That's going to look a little different with your structure. Some of you guys have chosen like political speeches. So if you're choosing political speeches or choosing articles, I would end up summarizing based off of the main arguments. Different from how I summarize, which is I broke it up by scenes. And so this will work if you're doing an Instagram video, a YouTube video, things like that. And I could probably cut this down, I'm realizing, but scenes aren't really going to work for every artifact. So I broke it up a little bit. I made sure that I attributed where I got it from, especially important if you've used social media. I explained that thing. One thing to note about, let's see, I talked about formatting here. So I just used the basic formatting that came with Google Docs. Pages has one, Word has one, and it's super easy. Once I put in this little I, the Roman numeral I, it kind of did its own thing. If you're not into this, you can absolutely come up with a different way, but there needs to be distinction between your ideas. There should be different kinds of indentations, not just like basic summary and then 40 bullet points. Like that's not helpful. Our brain can't understand that very well. So remember, it's a rhetorical document. You want your reader to understand it. One other note about how I wrote this outline. So you'll notice there's a lot of complete sentences. You don't need complete sentences. So some of these, like this, I said not wearing a uniform or badge, appears to be just a neighbor wearing jeans, shorts, and a t-shirt. Some of that is like complete. Some of it, like not wearing a uniform or badge, appears to be, that's not actually a complete sentence. That's okay. Because an outline, you're supposed to be able to read it fairly quickly and gather information quickly. So if I have a ton of prepositions, a ton of transitions, things like that, you're not going to read it quickly. It's just a paper that happens to be with Roman numerals. So please exercise your editing skills when writing an outline. And you can use mine kind of as a guide. Some things it's just difficult to do. So this is obviously a complete sentence. I could cut it down, but I didn't. You can also curse in yours. That's fine. I just edited some of mine out. One note is that if you're using a video that includes racist slurs, it's fine to quote those, but if you are then talking about them, don't. So let's say that the woman in this video, and I'm saying this intentionally, called him an N-word, a nigger. That's not a word that I'm going to use. However, I will quote her saying it. And then when I am analyzing it, I'll say when she used the N-word. So when it comes to racial slurs, try not to use them in your own analysis, but it's perfectly okay to quote it. In fact, it's better because your reader can understand the impact of that slur. One requirement I have for these outlines is that the complete sentences I need to see are your topic sentences. And they may be 2 topic sentences. That's fine. After that, you can just go ahead and outline it, but I need to see what each paragraph's argument is going to be. And I'm going to run through mine really quick. So I structured mine mainly based off of the fallacies that I saw, and I saw a couple. It only hit about like, I don't know, maybe 4 or so. And so the first one I noticed was hasty generalization. So I said that the woman assumed the resident was loitering, trespassing, or dangerous instead of the more obvious conclusion that he too lived in the neighborhood. This hasty generalization was made based on skin color and the absence of actual suspicious behavior, a result of historical prejudice and lack of representation. So I mentioned the strategy or the fallacy, excuse me. But I don't stop there. A topic sentence shouldn't just say like, look what I found hasty generalization. Like, no, explain why that's important. In my case, I'm bringing in a lot of historical evidence to show, and a little bit of blind spot to show what drove, like what was going on in this woman, like what led her to these kind of reactions. And so I explain what I'm going to be talking about in my paragraph, which is I'm bringing up some historical stuff and the lack of representation of Black males in media, or just Black people in media. And I'll come back to this paragraph in a moment. My next one is about false authority, where I say that she assumes this neighborhood watch attitude. And I end up bringing in the history of whites-only suburbs. And I found this great source that was on Medium about a woman who's watching, if you have, what's it called, Nextdoor or the Ring, app that will have people communicate in your communities. There's a lot of racist stuff that happens. People reporting and saying, I saw a suspicious person on the corner of Highland, and it's like just a person who's mowing a lawn. So it's a very interesting article that I thought would be helpful. And then I went in, I actually, this was going to be a much longer paragraph because I was going to talk about white women throughout history who have weaponized the ability to call cops or call law enforcement or call whoever, people in charge, to beat up or lynch Black men. There's a very robust and kind of terrifying history of that. But I realized it was going to be too long because I had this one article, this should be from the New York Times, that was really helpful to contextualize that. But because it was going to be too long, I just split it into its own paragraph. So not every paragraph has to be a fallacy. Like if yours is getting really long, find a place to split it. You have some freedom with this outline. My next one talked about evoking power to call the police and how she appeals to ethos when you're just saying like, oh, I'm going to tell mom without justification, and also an appeal to force, especially in light of what's going on right now. You just can't call the police on a Black man right now without thinking about what's involved in that, especially in light of just how many police, I'll just say it, how many cops do listen to the person who's white instead of the person who's Black. I didn't really feel that I needed to give sources for that. I probably could go in there if I was coming up short and find some examples of that happening recently. But I didn't feel the need to do that in the same way that I did here when I'm talking about the Civil War and all of these cases like Emmett Till or the woman in Central Park recently who told the police that this man who was a bird watcher was threatening her life. All of these situations where women are weaponizing this racial anxiety. I felt I needed some backup for that. I didn't really need it for this. I went on to bring up red herrings. Her red herrings of saying, oh, you're a drug dealer. That I also is just going to be more analysis, so I didn't feel the need to bring up any sources. And as I went on, as I was researching and just Googling things, I found something called the backfire effect. I thought that'd be an interesting thing to bring in. And I'll come back to where I ended, but let's look at one of these paragraphs. So this looks a little long, but the thing is, if I actually put all of this together in sentences, it wouldn't be as long. And looking at this, I could probably cut some stuff down. So I made a claim of what happened. I analyzed it. And then I brought in a couple sources I found. And there's two ways. So I brought it up between slavery, Jim Crow era, post-Jim Crow, media representation of Black men. All of these things contribute to these biases that women have, assuming, generalizing that a Black man is someone criminal or suspicious. So that's what I wanted to prove. And I found a couple sources for that I wanted to use. I also ended up using blind spot here. So there's two ways that you can cite. One is to use footnotes. And again, go on OWL Purdue to look at the right way to do that. A footnote, you're just going to do insert footnote, which is right here. And then it will bing you down here, and you can add in the name, the title, all the stuff that you'd probably say if you were writing it within the paragraph. And this is, normally you have to do an entire citation. I'm not really worried about that right now. Another way you could do it is in MLA. So down here, I entered it in the MLA, which meant within this paragraph, I didn't wait to put it down here. I added the same information, exact same information, plus the page number. Excuse me. Very important is that no matter what I brought in, I ended up tying it back to the original source. So I was all over the place in this paragraph. However, I wanted to make sure that I tied it back as much as I could to the woman in the video, so that I'm not just like giving this whole other argument about history. I'm helping my reader understand, hey, all this history, it's helping you understand this woman's hasty generalization. So everything under this line, I didn't fill out completely. I made a note of that, but I did want to give you what my paragraphs were going to be and the sources that I found for those. If you have any additional questions about how I would use these, please let me know. But I want to move to the end. I ended up adding this paragraph, why does it matter? It's not necessary. I just thought like, well, mine, the guy was laughing while it was happening. He didn't get hurt. The cops didn't show up. It was a pretty like seemingly neutral video. And so it could easily be written off to say like, all right, so what? It was just a mistake and she was crazy. So I wanted to add a paragraph about why I thought this mattered in the big picture. You don't have to do that. You can add in whatever kinds of paragraphs you think will help us understand what's going on. Again, you have some freedom with this paper. And conclusions, there's a lot of ways that you can conclude. Try not to just summarize it. I thought that for my paper, let's do just how. I might add something that's just how to avoid these kind of interactions, or how can somebody handle it? Or for me as a white person, I was even thinking, all right, as a white person, let's say you were a bystander to this happening. How would you have intervened? What would be a good way to do that? So there's lots of different ways to add this, like, all right, so what? What do I do with this information? Think about what is a good way to leave your reader. What do you want them to do with this? I just ask you to not just summarize what you wrote.